Dr. Elena Reyes stared at the signal patterns dancing across the holographic display. The Pentagon's hastily assembled response center hummed with activity around her, but she remained fixed on the mathematical sequences that shouldn't make sense, yet did. "It's not just data," she murmured, tracing a finger along a particularly complex sequence. "There's a cadence to it, a rhythm." General Harlow leaned over her shoulder, his aftershave mingling with the scent of the strong coffee that kept the command center running. "In English, Doctor, what are we looking at?" Elena zoomed in on a repeating pattern. Most alien contact scenarios assume communication based on universal constants, mathematics, physics. But this, she highlighted a sequence that pulsed irregularly. This carries emotional markers. Emotions? From aliens? The skepticism in his voice was thick. "Fear has biological signatures across species on Earth," Elena explained, pulling up comparative data from her previous research. Heart rates increase, stress hormones surge, breathing patterns change. These signal modulations mirror those physiological responses. Across the room, Dr. Abernathy, the astrophysicist who'd first validated the signal's extraterrestrial origin, joined them. "The source is definitely Ta Ceti, approximately 12 light-years away. Which means they sent this 12 years ago." Elena finished, the implication sinking in. Whatever emergency they're facing might already be over. General Harlow's weathered face hardened. "Or it's gotten much worse." Elena worked through the night, her fingers flying across adaptive interfaces as she integrated linguistic algorithms with emotional recognition software originally designed for counterterrorism. By morning, she had extracted fragments, mathematical representations of concepts like danger, extinction, and help. When President Winters arrived for her briefing, Elena was running on her 5th cup of coffee and second wind. "Dr. Reyes believes the signal contains emotional content," General Harlow explained, gesturing toward the main display where Elena had mapped the signal's emotional landscape. The president studied the visualization. "You're sitting there scared." "Terrified," Elena corrected, "and desperate." The signal repeats in patterns consistent with urgent distress calls across human cultures. "It's an SOS, Madam President, from a civilization we know nothing about," the president noted. "This could be a trap." Dr. Abernathy cleared his throat. "Actually, we've been studying Ta Ceti for decades. Their star is a G-class yellow dwarf, similar to our sun but older. We've detected exoplanets in its habitable zone. Spectroscopic analysis suggests at least one has an oxygen-nitrogen atmosphere." "So they breathe like us," the president mused. "Possibly," Abernathy nodded. "But more importantly, their star has shown increased activity in recent years. Unusual solar flares, coronal mass ejections, nothing catastrophic by our measurements. But," Elena finished his thought, "but if their civilization evolved under more stable conditions, even minor stellar fluctuations could threaten their survival." President Winters turned to the military advisors. "Options." Admiral Chen stepped forward. "We have no viable method of reaching Ta Ceti within a human lifetime, Madam President. Even our most advanced propulsion theories would require decades." "So we can do nothing?" the president asked. Elena straightened, sudden inspiration striking. "No, we can answer them." "To what end?" General Harlow asked. "We can't help them." "Maybe not today," Elena conceded, "but there's something powerful in knowing you're not alone." She pulled up the communication interface. "And maybe, just maybe, the knowledge that someone heard them will give them hope while we figure out how to do the impossible." The president nodded slowly. "Draft a response, Dr. Reyes. Let them know humanity is listening." As Elena began composing humanity's first deliberate message to an alien civilization, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was merely the beginning of something much larger than anyone in the room could imagine. Elena's eyes burned as she scrolled through the Setian data archives. Their transmission contained more than just a cry for help. It was a digital library of their entire civilization, compressed and encoded within the signal's complex harmonics. They didn't just send an SOS, she explained to the assembled team. They sent their history, their biology, their technology, everything. It's like they created a time capsule of their entire species. Dr. Patel, the quantum computing specialist who had helped decode the dense data packets, pulled up a holographic representation of Setian physiology. The aliens were bipedal but with elongated torsos and 4 upper limbs that branched from shoulder structures. Their heads housed sensory organs arranged in patterns optimized for underwater predation, evolutionary heritage from their ocean-dwelling ancestors. Fascinating, Dr. Patel murmured. Their brain structure suggests distributed cognitive processing, similar to octopi, but far more advanced. Admiral Jefferson studied the images with narrowed eyes. What about their technology? Weapons capabilities? Alina shook her head. That's not what they prioritized in their transmission. Their technology focuses on environmental adaptation, not conflict. She pulled up schematics of the Setian evacuation ships. These vessels are marvels of engineering, designed to sustain tens of thousands in hibernation for decades. But they only have enough for a fraction of their population. President Winters studied the projections. How many will they leave behind? Alina swallowed hard. Based on their selection protocols, which prioritize genetic diversity and technical expertise, approximately 70% of their 8 billion population. A heavy silence fell over the room. "Show me their selection criteria again," General Harlow requested, his voice uncharacteristically soft. Alina pulled up the complex algorithms the Setians were using to determine who would survive. The mathematical formulas were elegant but ruthless, optimized for species survival rather than individual lives. "They're accepting this?" President Winters asked, incredulity in her voice. "Their psychological profile suggests a highly communal species with a different relationship to individual versus collective survival than humans," Alina explained. "They mourn, but they accept the mathematical inevitability." Dr. Abernathy cleared his throat. The data on their star's deterioration is alarming. Their initial models predicted gradual destabilization over centuries, but recent data shows accelerating decay. The most recent information in their transmission indicated potential nova activity within 50 years. But that was 12 years ago, Admiral Jefferson noted. "What's the situation now?" "We've been monitoring Tau Ceti closely," Dr. Abernathy replied. "Our observations suggest the destabilization is proceeding even faster than their models predicted. We might be looking at catastrophic stellar events within the next 2 decades. Alina felt a chill run through her, which means even their evacuation plans might be insufficient. They're racing against a clock that's ticking faster than they realized. Captain Weizong, who had been silently observing from the back of the room, finally spoke. "The Prometheus project. How quickly could it be ready?" All eyes turned to him. The Prometheus was theoretical, a fusion-driven spacecraft designed to achieve a significant fraction of light speed, but never intended for construction in their lifetime. Admiral Jefferson laughed without humor. "Captain, Prometheus is a thought experiment, not a viable mission." "With respect, Admiral," Zhang replied, his voice calm but determined. "So was splitting the atom, until we did it." President Winters studied Captain Zhang with newfound interest. "How quickly?" Dr. Patel ran calculations on his tablet. "If we diverted resources from every major space program globally, accelerated the fusion containment research at ITER, and implemented the theoretical propulsion designs without the usual testing cycles." He looked up. 5 years to launch. Maybe 4 if we get lucky. "And arrival time?" the president pressed. "At maximum theoretical acceleration, 12 years transit time." Alina did the math. "Which means we'd arrive in approximately 27 years from when they sent their distress call." "Too late," Admiral Jefferson concluded. "Maybe not," Alina countered, pulling up the Setian hibernation technology. "Their long-term survival plans extend for decades. If even a portion of their population is still there, still fighting for survival. She left the thought unfinished. President Winters stood, decision made. Prepare a briefing for the United Nations Security Council. We're going to need every nation on board. She turned to Captain Zhang. And Captain, start thinking about your crew requirements. As the room emptied, Elena remained, staring at the alien faces in the transmission. We're coming, she whispered to them across 12 light years of empty space. Hold on. The United Nations Security Council chamber buzzed with tension as the third day of emergency sessions dragged on. Delegates huddled in clusters, whispering urgently as diplomatic aides rushed between them with revised proposals and hastily drafted agreements. Captain Zhang sat quietly in the observation gallery, watching the political drama unfold below. His military training had prepared him for many things, but not for the weight of potentially becoming humanity's first interstellar ambassador, or its first interstellar casualty. "They're still arguing about funding allocations," said a voice beside him. Elena Reyes slipped into the adjacent seat, looking exhausted but determined. Meanwhile, Ta City keeps destabilizing. Zhang nodded. Politicians plan for the next election. Military plans for the next war. No one plans for the next century. Except you, apparently. Elena studied his face. Why volunteer for a mission you might never return from? Before Zhang could answer, a commotion erupted on the council floor. The Chinese ambassador had risen to her feet, silencing the chamber with a raised hand. "The People's Republic of China has reached a decision," she announced, her voice carrying through the hall. "We will contribute our XF-42 fusion containment system and the resources of our lunar research station to this mission." A murmur swept through the assembly. The XF-42 was rumored to be decades ahead of publicly known fusion technology, its development shrouded in secrecy. The Russian ambassador stood next. "Russia offers the expertise of the Zvezda Propulsion Laboratory and our Antarctic antimatter production facility." One by one, nations rose to make their pledges. The European Union committed its orbital manufacturing capabilities. India offered its quantum computing network. Japan promised advanced materials from its deep-sea mining operations. Elena leaned toward Zhang. "They're actually doing it." "Of course they are," Zhang replied. "They're scared. Of the aliens. Of irrelevance." Zhang's eyes tracked the procession of pledges. Humanity just discovered we're not alone, and we're being asked to save a more advanced civilization. This isn't just about compassion. It's about proving our place in the cosmos. Below, the Secretary-General called for a formal vote on Resolution 2157. The Prometheus Initiative. The electronic tally board lit up with green lights as nation after nation voted in favor. "Captain Zhang," the Secretary-General called out, "please address the Council." Zhang felt Elena squeeze his arm encouragingly as he made his way to the speaker's podium. Looking out at the assembled representatives of Earth, he took a deep breath. "Distinguished delegates, I stand before you honored by your trust and sobered by the task ahead. The Prometheus mission represents not just a technical challenge but a moral one. We go not knowing if anyone remains to be saved, not knowing if we ourselves will return, but we go nevertheless." He paused, gathering his thoughts. Throughout human history, we have reached across divides, of oceans, of languages, of beliefs. Now we reach across the stars to an alien people who didn't believe we could help them. I cannot promise success, but I can promise this: we will bring the best of humanity with us. Our resilience, our creativity, our refusal to abandon those in need, even when logic suggests we should. The chamber was silent, hanging on his words. The Cetians sent their distress call to 53 star systems. We were the least advanced civilization on their list, yet we will be the first to respond. Not because we are the most capable, but because we are the most determined. As Jean concluded his address, the applause began slowly, then built to a thunderous ovation. Resolution 2157 passed unanimously. Earth would send the Prometheus to Ta City. Later that evening, Zhang stood on the balcony of his hotel room, gazing at the stars barely visible through New York City's light pollution. His secure phone buzzed with a message from his wife. He opened it to find a sonogram image of their unborn daughter. The message read simply, "She already looks stubborn, like her father." Zhang smiled despite the tightness in his chest. He would miss his daughter's entire childhood. By the time the Prometheus returned, if it returned, she would be a grown woman. "I'll make it worth it," he whispered to the distant stars. "For both our species." Day 847 of the mission, and Chief Engineer Quaim Osai couldn't sleep. The Prometheus hummed beneath him, its fusion reactor maintaining the delicate balance between thrust and stability as they hurtled through the void at unprecedented speed. He'd designed many of these systems himself, yet they were already being modified beyond their original specifications. Osei made his way to the engineering lab where Dr. Natasha Kuznetsova, their theoretical physicist, was running simulations on a holographic display. "You should be in hibernation," he said, sliding into the seat beside her. She didn't look up from her calculations. "So should you. The primary coolant manifold is showing micro-fluctuations. Nothing dangerous, but," he shrugged. "But you worry like a parent with a newborn." Natasha finished for him, a smile softening her focused expression. "Speaking of which, have you seen the latest transmission from Earth?" Osei shook his head. He'd been avoiding the data packets from home. Each one arrived with increasing delay as the distance between Prometheus and Earth grew. Each reminded him of how much life he was missing. Natasha pulled up a video file. Captain Zhang's daughter took her first steps. The image showed a toddler with Zhang's determined eyes tottering across a living room floor. Behind the camera, Zhang's wife could be heard encouraging her. The timestamp showed the event had occurred 3 months ago. "He's missing everything," Osei murmured. "We all are," Natasha replied, returning to her simulations. "But look what I'm not missing." The display showed a theoretical model of their propulsion system, but with significant modifications. The familiar toroidal magnetic containment field had been reshaped into something more complex, almost organic in its configuration. "What am I looking at?" Osei asked, professional curiosity overriding his melancholy. "I've been studying the Setian biological data," Natasha explained. "Their neural structures use distributed processing networks to handle complex calculations. I wondered if we could apply similar principles to our containment field." Osei studied the simulation, immediately grasping the implications. "You're suggesting we create a self-adjusting magnetic field that responds to plasma fluctuations the way their brains respond to sensory input." "Exactly." Natasha's eyes gleamed with excitement. "Initial simulations suggest it could increase efficiency by 23% and reduce our travel time by nearly 2 years. Osei calculated quickly. "If it works," Natasha cautioned. Osei was already pulling up the engineering schematics. "Let's find out." 3 decks above, Captain Zhang stood in the observation dome, gazing at the stars. Lieutenant Sofia Rodriguez joined him, offering a cup of the ship's rationed coffee. "Engineering's busy tonight," she noted. "Osei and Kuznetsova have been in the lab for hours." Zhang nodded. "They're trying to make us go faster." "Is that possible?" Rodriguez asked. "I thought we were already pushing the theoretical limits." "Theory changes when necessity demands it," Zhang replied. He took a sip of coffee and grimaced. No matter how advanced their technology, they still couldn't make decent coffee in space. "How are the crew's psychology reports?" Rodriguez hesitated. "Mixed. Extended hibernation is taking a toll. Dr. Patel has developed a neural stimulation program to prevent cognitive atrophy, but it's experimental. Like everything else on this ship," Zhang said with a wry smile. Rodriguez studied her captain's face. "Sir, may I ask a personal question?" Zhang nodded. "Do you regret volunteering, knowing what you're missing back home?" Zhang was silent for a long moment. "My grandmother once told me a story about her grandfather, who left China during a famine to work building railroads in America. He sent every penny home, living in squalor so his family could eat. He never saw his children grow up." Zhang turned to face the stars again. "When I asked if he regretted it, she said. Regret is a luxury for those with choices. He gestured toward the distant pinpoint that was Ta City. We made our choice when we learned they needed help. Everything after that is just duty. A soft alert chimed, and Rodriguez checked her tablet. Osai wants permission to modify the containment field configuration. He says they've had a breakthrough. Zhang smiled. Tell him he has 48 hours to prove it works. Then we all go back into hibernation, with dreams of getting home a little sooner. As Rodriguez left, Zhang remained at the viewport, watching the unchanging stars. Somewhere behind him, Earth continued its orbit around a sun he could no longer distinguish from the countless other stars. Somewhere ahead, an alien civilization might still be fighting for survival, unaware that humanity was racing to their aid. We're coming, he whispered to the void. Faster than we thought possible. The Prometheus decelerated into the Ta City system, its fusion drives flaring against the void as they bled off the tremendous velocity accumulated over 12 years of acceleration. Through the main viewport, Captain Zhang watched the system unfold before them. A scene both familiar from simulations and disturbingly alien in reality. Ta City itself pulsed with angry flares, its corona extending much further than Earth's sun. Around it, planets orbited in familiar patterns, but it was the artificial structures that captured everyone's attention. Thousands of vessels moving in complex, synchronized patterns around the third planet. Their evacuation is still underway, Dr. Elena Reyes observed, her voice hushed with awe. After 12 years in hibernation, she looked older, lines etching her face that hadn't been there at launch. They'd survived this long. Lieutenant Rodriguez monitored the communication systems. I'm detecting massive signal traffic between vessels. Highly structured data packets, similar to the SOS archive, but with real-time modifications. They're coordinating the evacuation, Zhang said. Broadcast our arrival message, standard protocol. Rodriguez sent the carefully crafted greeting they'd prepared years ago. A simple mathematical sequence followed by the original Cetian distress signal and humanity's response. Silence followed. Then, chaos. Multiple signals incoming, Rodriguez reported, her fingers flying over the controls. There. She paused, frowning. Sir, they seem confused. Translation algorithms suggest disbelief, possibly alarm. They weren't expecting us, Osei said from his engineering station. Remember, they classified Earth as pre-spaceflight, a primitive world that couldn't possibly respond. Zhang straightened his uniform. And yet, here we are. Maintain position and continue broadcasting our peaceful intentions. The response, when it finally came, was a single transmission on a tightly focused beam. The translation matrix converted it to a voice, melodic, with harmonics beyond human vocal ranges. Unknown vessel at system periphery. You claim Earth origin. This is impossible. Identify your actual point of origin and purpose. Zhang nodded to Rodriguez, who opened a channel. This is Captain Weizong of the Earth vessel Prometheus. We received your distress call 24 years ago. We've come to render assistance. Another long pause. Impossible, came the reply. Earth technology assessment from our last survey indicated no capability for interstellar travel. Verification required. Before Zhang could respond, a smaller vessel detached from the Cetian fleet, accelerating toward their position with startling speed. They're sending someone to check us out, Osei observed, monitoring the approaching craft. Their propulsion technology is elegant. Zhang turned to his crew. Prepare for direct contact. Dr. Rice, you'll lead the diplomatic team. Chief Osei, prepare technical documentation on the Prometheus for exchange. Dr. Patel, stand by with medical protocols. As the Cetian shuttle approached, they got their first live view of the aliens. The vessel's transparent forward section revealed a tall, slender being with 4 upper limbs and iridescent skin that shifted colors with movement. Its elongated head housed large, complex eyes positioned for predatory depth perception. Ambassador Threlvac. Elena breathed, recognizing the distinctive markings from the archive data. Their senior diplomatic advisor. They're taking us seriously. The docking procedure was completed with precision, both vessels adjusting their spin to create a stable gravitational field at the connection point. As the airlock cycled, the crew stood in formation, hearts pounding with the weight of history. Ambassador Threlvac entered the Prometheus with fluid grace, towering over even the tallest humans by nearly half a meter. Its body shifted through colors, blue rippling to green with undertones of yellow, a physiological display of emotional states that the translation matrix identified as surprised assessment. The ambassador studied them silently, multifaceted eyes taking in every detail of the human crew and their vessel. When it finally spoke, its voice resonated through the ship's translation system. Your vessel design is primitive, yet you are here. The colors shifted again, settling into a deep purple. How? Zhang stepped forward, maintaining the respectful distance outlined in their first contact protocols. We built the Prometheus specifically to respond to your distress call. It incorporates technologies we developed after receiving your message. Threlvac's upper limbs moved in complex patterns, a gestural language supplementing its speech. You accelerated your technological development to answer our call. This contradicts all models of civilizational progression. Elena stepped forward. With respect, Ambassador, human development has rarely followed predictable models. The ambassador's colors flashed briefly to a brilliant white before settling back to purple. Clearly, it turned to Zhang. Your arrival is unanticipated. Our selection protocols were finalized years ago. The evacuation proceeds according to plan. And those not selected? Zhang asked quietly. Threlvac's colors darkened. They remain, as was always their fate. Zhang exchanged glances with his crew, the unspoken understanding passing between them. They hadn't come all this way to accept mathematical inevitability. Ambassador, Zhang said carefully, we'd like to propose an alternative approach. The Station Evacuation Command Center sprawled across what had once been a cultural museum. Holographic displays floated throughout the vast chamber, tracking thousands of vessels and billions of lives with cold precision. Chief Architect Zintor, her skin a steady blue-gray that indicated professional focus, guided the human delegation through the facility. Each vessel's manifest is predetermined, she explained, gesturing to a complex three-dimensional display. Selection criteria were established by our finest minds and refined over decades. The protocols are beyond question. Osei studied the nearest display, his engineer's mind already identifying inefficiencies in the Station ship designs. These environmental systems, he said, pointing to a schematic. They're running parallel redundancies. Of course, Zintor replied, her tone suggesting the obviousness of this approach. Backup systems are essential for deep space travel, but they're not integrated, Osei continued. Each system functions independently, with its own power requirements and failure points. Zintor's skin rippled with faint green. Confusion, according to their translation matrix. Independent systems prevent cascading failures. Dr. Kuznetsova joined them, studying the schematics with intense focus. On Earth, we study biological systems that use interconnected redundancies. When one system weakens, others compensate automatically, sharing the load. Zintor's confusion deepened. You model technology on biological systems. Such unpredictability would be concerning. Captain John watched this exchange with growing interest. The cultural divide was becoming clear. The Setians valued precision, predictability, and linear solutions. Humanity thrived on adaptation, integration, and learning from natural systems. Ambassador Threlvac approached, skin shifting between diplomatic purple and a deeper hue that suggested concern. Your captain has made an unusual request. The ambassador addressed the chief architect. They wish to propose modifications to our evacuation protocols. Zintor's skin blanched to pale gray. Shock, perhaps even offense. The protocols are finalized. They represent optimal solutions. Optimal within your parameters, Elena interjected gently. But what if those parameters could be expanded? Lieutenant Rodriguez, who had been quietly studying the Setian traffic coordination systems, spoke up. Your evacuation ships move in sequential waves to prevent collisions. But if you implemented a dynamic flow algorithm, what Lieutenant Rodriguez means, Zhang interceded, noting the Setian's deepening confusion, is that we'd like to demonstrate alternative approaches. One vessel, one test. If we fail, nothing is lost. A tense silence followed as Threlvac and Zintor communicated in rapid gestural language, their skin colors shifting through complex patterns. Finally, Threlvac turned to the humans. The High Council has granted provisional approval. You may demonstrate your concepts on evacuation vessel TEX 1138, which is scheduled for departure in 3 rotations. The vessel's current capacity is 90,000 individuals. Zhang nodded. Thank you, Ambassador. We'll need full schematics and access to your engineering teams. As the Setians departed to make arrangements, Elena moved closer to Zhang. They're humoring us, she whispered. They don't believe we can improve their designs. Good, Zhang replied. Underestimation is our advantage. Osai was already organizing the human team, assigning specialized tasks based on each person's expertise. Dr. Kuznetsova, focus on power distribution. Rodriguez, traffic flow and loading procedures. Dr. Patel, hibernation density optimization. Dr. Patel frowned. Hibernation density. Their pods are already efficiently arranged. Yes, but they're arranged linearly, Osei explained, sketching a concept on his tablet. What if we stack them in a helix pattern? Like DNA. Or like the way plants arrange leaves to maximize sunlight, Rodriguez added, catching his drift. Exactly. Ozzy's eyes lit with excitement. We need to think organically, not mechanically. As the human team brainstormed, a group of Setian engineers entered the command center, led by a younger alien whose skin rippled with cautious yellow curiosity. I am Junlai, Secondary Systems Coordinator, it introduced itself. I have been assigned to facilitate your demonstration. The slight pause suggested babysit might have been a more accurate translation. Zhang greeted the alien warmly. We're grateful for your assistance. Our chief engineer has some initial questions about your hibernation pod interfaces. Junlai approached Osai cautiously. Your species has hibernation technology. Our assessment indicated. We don't, Osai admitted cheerfully. But we have bees. Bees. Junlai's skin flickered with confusion. Small flying insects that build honeycomb structures, Osai explained, pulling up an image. They solved efficient space utilization millions of years ago. We're just copying their homework. As Osai continued explaining, other Setian engineers drifted closer, their professional detachment giving way to reluctant curiosity. One by one, the humans pulled them into conversations, asking questions that the Setians had never considered, proposing solutions that violated their design philosophies, yet couldn't be immediately dismissed. By the end of the first day, the command center hummed with an energy it hadn't seen in years, the electricity of possibilities not yet explored, of hope where there had been only grim acceptance. Zhang watched it unfold with quiet satisfaction. The real work was just beginning, but the first barrier had fallen. The Setians were listening. 3 days into the retrofitting of vessel TEX 1138, and the Setian engineering deck had transformed from an orderly workspace into what Junlai called organized chaos. Human and Setian engineers worked side by side, their differences in approach creating friction that, unexpectedly, generated innovative solutions. It shouldn't work, Junlai remarked, skin flickering between yellow curiosity and blue concern as it watched Dr. Kuznetsova reconfiguring the hibernation pod power distribution. You're creating deliberate inefficiencies in the system. Not inefficiencies, Kuznetsova corrected, not looking up from her work. Adaptive pathways, like how your circulatory system can reroute blood flow when a vessel is blocked. But systems should be optimized for maximum efficiency, Junlai insisted. Optimized systems fail catastrophically, Osei interjected, joining them. Adaptive systems bend but don't break. He pulled up a simulation showing how their modifications would respond to various failure scenarios. See, when one section loses power, the load shifts automatically. You lose some efficiency but gain tremendous resilience. Junlai's skin shifted to a thoughtful purple as it studied the results. This approach contradicts our design philosophy. That's precisely why we're here, Captain Zhang said, entering the engineering bay with Ambassador Threlvac. Fresh perspectives. The ambassador's skin displayed complex patterns that the translation matrix couldn't fully interpret, something between reluctant admiration and deep unease. Your progress reports are unexpected. Chief Architect Zintor requests a demonstration of your modifications. Lieutenant Rodriguez emerged from the hibernation chamber, where she'd been reconfiguring the pod arrangement. Perfect timing. We've just completed the triple helix stacking pattern for Section 1. The group moved to the hibernation chamber, where the transformation was immediately apparent. Where once the Cetian pods had been arranged in precise rows and columns, they now formed an interlocking spiral pattern that utilized the previously empty central space. Zintor had joined them, her skin a pale gray of professional skepticism. This arrangement violates standard access protocols. Emergency evacuation would be compromised. Actually, Rodriguez said, activating a simulation, our pattern creates multiple access paths instead of just two. In an emergency, evacuation time is reduced by 27%. The simulation showed how the new arrangement allowed for more efficient movement through the chamber. Zintor's skin flickered with reluctant interest. Furthermore, Dr. Patel added, by reconfiguring the neural interfaces, we've reduced power consumption for each pod by 18%. The pods now form a network that shares cognitive monitoring duties, rather than each pod handling its own diagnostics. Like a distributed nervous system, Junlai remarked, earning a surprised look from the other Cetians. Ambassador Threlvac studied the modifications with intense focus. Your preliminary calculations suggested a 15% increase in capacity. These modifications appear more extensive. Osei grinned. That was 3 days ago. We're now projecting a 38% increase for TX-1138, which means approximately 34,000 additional lives saved per vessel. The numbers hung in the air, impossible to dismiss. Zintor's professional detachment wavered, her skin shifting to a deep blue that suggested emotional conflict. If implemented across the entire evacuation fleet, she began, hundreds of millions more could be saved. Zhang finished quietly. A heavy silence fell over the chamber. For the Cetians, these weren't abstract figures. They represented families, colleagues, and communities previously consigned to death by mathematical necessity. Junlai broke the silence, addressing Zintor directly. Chief Architect, I request permission to form an implementation team to adapt these modifications for other vessel classes. Zintor hesitated, centuries of methodical procedure warring with the undeniable potential before her. Such widespread changes would require extensive testing and... We don't have time for extensive testing, Rodriguez interrupted, pulling up the latest stellar analysis. Tau Ceti's degradation is accelerating. At current rates, catastrophic stellar events will begin within 17 months, not the 24 previously calculated. The new data sent ripples of alarm through the Cetian officials, their skin flashing warning colors. A coordinated implementation is still possible, Zhang asserted calmly. But we need to move quickly and work in parallel, not sequentially. Parallel implementation violates safety protocols. Zintor objected, though with less conviction. Then change the protocols, Dr. Ray said simply. You created them. You can adapt them. Ambassador Threlvac's skin settled into a resolve indicating deep purple. Perhaps it is time to reevaluate our approach more broadly. The ambassador turned to Captain Zhang. Your crew has demonstrated technical innovations, but I sense there is more you wish to address. Zhang nodded. The selection protocols themselves. We believe they can be expanded beyond genetic diversity and technical expertise. To what criteria? Threlvac asked. To include those who think differently, Zhang said. Your civilization values consistency and precision. These qualities built your remarkable technology, but different perspectives. Artists, philosophers, those who challenge conventions. These individuals often provide solutions that logical progression cannot predict. Like you have, Junlai observed softly. Zhang smiled. Exactly. Diversity of thought may be as valuable to your species' future as genetic diversity. As the implications of this idea spread through the room, Threlvac made a decision that would alter the course of Sishan civilization. I will address the High Council immediately. In the meantime, the ambassador gestured to Junlai. You have your implementation team. Begin adapting these modifications for all vessel classes. As the Sishans departed with new purpose, Alina moved beside Zhang. We're really doing this, she whispered. We're changing an alien civilization's approach to survival. No, Zhang corrected gently. We're just reminding them of something they forgot along the way. That sometimes salvation comes from the unexpected. Ta City's corona flared with unprecedented violence, sending waves of charged particles and radiation across its system. From the observation deck of the Sishan flagship, renamed Zhang's Folly in a gesture that mixed honor with the subtle Sishan humor the humans had slowly discovered, Captain Zhang watched as the final evacuation vessels accelerated away from the dying star. The last transport has cleared the orbital threshold, Junlai reported, its skin a calm blue of professional satisfaction despite the gravity of the moment. 78.4% of our population successfully evacuated. Ambassador Threlvac stood beside Zhang, both of them silent as they contemplated the numbers. What had once been an acceptance of 30% survival had transformed into a 78% salvation. Over 3 billion more lives saved than originally planned. Your species will remember this day differently than mine, Threlvac observed, breaking the silence. For us, it remains a day of immeasurable loss. For us, it's still a day of loss, Zhang corrected gently, but also a reminder of what cooperation can achieve. The ambassador's skin shifted to a reflective purple. When we sent our distress call 26 years ago, we included Earth as an afterthought. Your technological development parameters suggested no possibility of response within a useful time frame. The alien's upper limbs moved in a gesture that the humans had come to recognize as profound respect. We have had to reevaluate many parameters. Alina Reyes joined them, carrying a data crystal containing the final evacuation statistics. The last vessel incorporated every innovation we developed, plus 2 more that the Sishan human engineering teams created independently. It's carrying 15% more passengers than even our modified designs predicted. Threlvac's skin rippled with colors that indicated pride. Junlai's team has demonstrated creativity that would have been discouraged in our previous social structure. Junlai ducked its elongated head in a gesture of modesty, but the yellow flickers of pride couldn't be suppressed in its skin. A soft alarm chimed, and Osai's voice came over the communication system. Captain, Ta City's magnetic field is collapsing more rapidly than projected. We need to begin our departure sequence immediately. Zhang nodded to Threlvac. It seems our time here is coming to an end. The ambassador gestured to a waiting Sishan transport. The Prometheus has served its purpose admirably, but its technology remains insufficient for the journey home. We would be honored if you would join our fleet aboard vessels of our design. With human modifications, Junlai added with what the humans now recognized as humor. Zhang shook his head. The Prometheus may be outdated by your standards, but she's our vessel. We came on her, and will return on her. He smiled. Though we would gratefully accept any modifications your engineers might suggest for our return journey. As final preparations were made for the Prometheus's departure, Ambassador Threlvac gathered the human crew for a formal ceremony. The ambassador's skin displayed a ceremonial pattern of deep blue and gold as it presented Captain Zhang with a crystalline sphere. "This contains a message I have transmitted to the 52 other civilizations we contacted," Threlvac explained. "They should know what Earth has done." Zhang accepted the gift with proper solemnity. "What does it say?" Threlvac's skin shifted to simple, honest colors. "It says, we judged humanity primitive. We were wrong. They came when no others responded. They solved what we could not. They think differently, chaotically, irrationally, brilliantly. Today, 78% of our population survives because humans refuse to accept impossibility." The Prometheus departed the Tau Ceti system just hours before the star entered its final catastrophic phase. The ship bore little resemblance to the vessel that had left Earth 16 years earlier. Cetian modifications had streamlined its hull, enhanced its propulsion systems, and reinforced its structure. The journey home would take only 7 years instead of 12. As they watched Tau Ceti recede behind them, Dr. Rice joined Captain Zhang on the observation deck. "We did what we came to do," she said quietly. Zhang nodded. "And more. Do you think it will change things back home? Knowing we're not alone, that we've helped an advanced civilization." "It already has," Zhang replied, showing her a transmission they'd received from Earth. The first images of a prototype vessel incorporating Cetian design principles. Humanity is already building the next Prometheus. "And the Cetians?" Elena asked. "What will they become?" Zhang smiled as he watched the distant fleet of evacuation ships, carrying billions of lives saved through the unlikely partnership of two very different species. "Something new, just as we will." As the Prometheus accelerated toward home, carrying technological gifts and cultural insights that would transform human civilization, 52 advanced civilizations received Threlvac's message. Many dismissed it as exaggeration. Some began reassessing their data on the small blue world they had previously ignored. And on that world, 16 light-years away, humanity looked to the stars with new understanding. They were not alone in the universe. And more importantly, they had something valuable to offer. The final entry in Captain Zhang's log read simply, "Today we learned that advancement isn't measured by technology alone, but by the willingness to help others against impossible odds." Perhaps that is humanity's greatest gift to the stars.